like you get a little bit more respect if you do that. If you could catch their joke, understand it, and throw a joke right back at them, you know, you're kind of like, oh, they're like, okay, you understood what I was saying, and they're like, all right, respect. You know, they respect that a little bit more. So that's all. If you do catch the joke and you have a good one you could throw back, go for it. Don't be afraid to do that. Just make sure it's, you know, not too harsh or anything. Make sure it's proportional. You know, baldness is always that's one of my go-to jokes. So another one here, show. Show. Important sign to know. Show. Show. I show you. You show me. Show. We can do show and tell. So show. Show. Also represent. It can be used. Sometimes you'll see symbolism or example. There's other signs. Sometimes you'll see the more English sign, like example or symbolism also. We talked about English signs? All right.
So.
You don't think so? Okay, good. Good. Is it in here? I need to go over this then because that's important. So, I'll get to bother first and then we'll do that. Bother. 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 You're bothering me? Bother. So, yes.
So do you keep the same direction for the whole sign? Because when you said you bother me, do you basically just switch hands?
Yes. Bothering me. Bothering me. That's the whole point of the directional signs. No, you don't switch hands like that. You just do it the one way. You are bothering me. Like that. So I can say, Ethan, just bothers me. I see him and I'm like, man, I wish I could be that tall. So bothered. It's bothering me. I mean, I'm pretty close to perfect, but I'm only 5'9".
He'll get shorter someday.
He will, but by that time I'll be really old. I'll be shorter. That's just not fair. I like to joke with my wife because, you know, she'd always say, like, especially when we had first gotten married, she's like, you know, I always imagined that I would marry someone older and taller than me. And I didn't get either of those. So yeah. Because I am a quarter of an inch shorter than my wife. So quarter of it, she's like 5'9" and a quarter, and I'm 5'9", like right on the dot. So it's a point of contention in our household. And she is older than me by 11 months, so just a little bit. But I love to tell my students. This is just kind of a funny little side note. You know, they'll have all their high school relationship drama and stuff, and my advice to them is always the same when they're like going on about it. I'm like, you want some advice? They're like, sure, Mr. Hall. I'm like, dump them. Whatever it is, I'm just like, just break up with them. It's a high school relationship, just end it. And so my advice is always the same. I'm like, you're not going to end up with the person you're in high school with anyways, unless you're me, of course. And they're like, because Michelle and I dated and I always tell them, like, my wife and I dated when I was a senior in high school, but she wasn't in high school. That's true. In her mind, it wasn't dating. No, we were dating by my senior year, like officially, like label on it and everything. So, no, I won her over by then. But I always tell them, like, yeah, but she wasn't in high school. They were like, okay. And I'm like, no, she was in college. And inevitably, usually one of the girls, are like, Mr. Holland. So I was like, hey. I used to be charming. Before I was this old guy that you see now. But let's talk about English signs a little bit also, and then we'll talk about classifiers, because this is an important topic. So we are learning what is called American Sign Language, ASL. That is its own language. As we learned last week, it has its own grammar, and I'll have that lesson up soon. If you follow along on YouTube or Facebook, that lesson will be up soon. It's just, I've been busy. It's sitting on my computer at home ready to be edited. Sorry, everybody. So, but yes, so you have ASL, that's what we're learning. It's got its own grammar, its own structure, its own idioms, its own expressions. We'll learn more about those later on in this course, but we will get to those. And then you have what's called signed English. It's a system that was developed to help deaf people learn to read, really. It's pretty much English on the hands. And so there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing bad about signed English. In fact, most deaf people you meet will sign a mix of the two, really. So, or they might tend to be more ASL grammar and use some English signs. And what I mean by English signs are usually, those are signs that are what's called initialized. So, for instance, at ASL I would sign make, produce, create. English signs, I might sign make, but I would also sign produce with P's and create with C's. There's nothing wrong with that, again, but it's not considered ASL. So that's really our goal, because if you could sign ASL, you could do sign English. But just because you can do sign English does not always mean you can do ASL. So if you can do this one, you're good. It's kind of like if you speak, this one's kind of like Spanglish almost. So if you could speak Spanish, you're good with it. You could do Spanglish. If you speak Spanish and English, I should say, you could do Spanglish. But if you're like me and you can speak, if you're fluent in Spanglish and English, you're probably not gonna, you're gonna struggle with Spanish. So it's that kind of idea. So this also shows in the sentence structure also. It'll use a lot more English sentence structure. And they have their own signs that'll be used. So remember I told you, how do we sign is?
No.
You don't. You don't sign is. There is no sign for is. But if we're talking about sign English, they have is, are, is, am, are, was, were, be, being, been. And they have all these different things like that. They have endings, like we might say in church when we're interpreting, we might just say like, God's righteous. It would sign, or righteousness. Sometimes we'll use that sign, like holiness with an R. A little bit of an English influence, but that's okay. But they will sign righteousness or ending, or they'll sign like the. All these things we don't have signs for. They've created signs for that. And so it's something to be familiar about. Our goal is ASL in here. We want to get you signing ASL because that's what deaf people prefer. A lot of times too, when you're talking to deaf people and they know you're hearing, they will sign more English for you, for your benefit. So a lot of deaf people will do that. Sometimes it's frustrating because sometimes it's not good signed English and you're kind of like, I don't understand what you just said. Can you just sign it ASL, please? But they try to accommodate and they'll sign more English. So then you go away thinking, oh look, they use signed English. But as soon as they go back over to their deaf friends, they're all ASL again. So something to be mindful of though is watch that. One of the best things you can do when you're watching people sign, watch how deaf people sign to each other. So when they're just talking to one another, watch how they sign. It's not rude. You're okay. If they don't want you to see the conversation, they'll go away. So they know that their language is visual, that people can be sitting over here and see what they're signing. They know that. If it's private, they'll walk away or they'll sign in such a way where you won't understand what they're talking about anyway. So, which you can totally do. I mean, those of us who are married in here, we do that all the time with our spouses. We'll be like, like that. You have no idea what's going on. You just know there's deaf people can do the same thing. It's easier in sign language because there's less. You say so much about the conversation up front that if you just come in the middle of the conversation, you're lost. Even if you know what signs are going on, you have no idea what they're talking about. So it's easier to do in sign language than English. But we're going for ASL. So watch how deaf people sign to each other. Try to just notice that in yourself. Interpreters call it dropping the English because you want to get rid of that English thinking. You want to think, when I interpret, here's what goes through my mind. I'm thinking, I'm hearing it come in, and in my mind I'm going, especially when I'm getting stuck. If there's something where I'm like, it's taking me a second to process, I think, what does that mean? How would a deaf person sign that? And that's kind of what's going through my head when I'm interpreting. And so, because I'm not wanting to sign it like all that English stuff, There's a place for that. Sometimes you'll come across deaf people who prefer that in the interpreter. They just say, they're just like, just straight English, or interpret English, it's fine, come on. And so, they prefer that. Some deaf people just want ASL. They don't mind. The other side of that from an interpreting perspective is when you're going into ASL, you are taking some liberties with it. So with the message, because you're changing it into a different language. With the English one, it's more direct. With the ASL, there's more changes happening. So something to think about. We want to go for, though, signing English. So even though you'll see a lot of deaf people kind of do what's called PSE, which is called Pigeon Sign English, not the bird. That's what you see a lot of. That was a lot of information. Do we have any questions so far? Okay. What
just happened?
Lots of stuff. There was a bird. All right, I know I told you to talk more about classifiers, and we're going to a little bit. We'll really dig in. It kind of works out well because our next unit is much more about classifiers. We're going to dig into it a lot more, and I'm going to have some videos to show you next week. but I just want to kind of review. Do y'all remember what we talked about with classifiers? Kind of. So classifiers are handshapes that represent a thing in its most simplest form. That is like the simplest definition I could come up with. So I could have, let's say I have this for a classifier. Classifiers can be any handshake. I play a game with my students. I've been on the fence about playing it with you all because I don't know if y'all will be like super into it. But what we did was we sat in a circle. We had A. We went around in a circle and everyone did a classifier with that handshake A. Some of them really struggled with it. So for example, A, you could put on a hat, pull up your socks, you could punch someone, you could jog, you could go fishing, you could ride a bike, you know, and you could drive. Then we go B, you could walk, yeah, you could knock on something. B, you could walk, slap someone, you can look around, you can wipe the sweat from your brow. So, you know, you could chop food. C, you know, you could, yeah, do a little heart. You could look through your binoculars. So we'd go around the room and do that. We actually might have too many people to really do it well in here to get through anything. It'd probably take a couple classes with how many people we've been having. So, but it's a fun exercise though to look at that, take a handshake and see how many classifiers, how many different things, because it's important to think outside the box. So let's go back to this classifier. Let's just do this one. What do y'all think this could be? It could be two people. I'm sorry? It's a V.
Toothpicks.
It's a V. It could be two people. You have two people walking along. Alright. Someone who's not Carol. You already gave me one. It'd be a peace out. Yes?
Two sticks on like glue.
Two sticks. Two sticks sticking up in the air. Maybe like TV antennas. Right? What else do y'all think?
Bunny ears.
Bunny ears.
Clock.
Little bunny foo hop through the forest. So, 10 and 2. Oh, where your hands are when you're driving. Oh, yeah, like where your hands are when you're driving. What else do we got? What do you think? What if, here we go. What if I turn it this way?
Walking.
It could be a person walking. Oh, this one. If I turn it this way, it could be a person swimming.
Actually.
If I turn it this way, it could be someone's eyes. So you could use that for like eyes. You could use that as a classifier. Someone could be like, you know, just told a lot with just, you know. You know, you could show where someone's eyes are going. You can even use this one for eyes too. So you can even mix up. I can be like, so see, now I've just used two different classifiers, but it's still the eyes. I use this one a lot with my students when people sign to me. I'll be like, because that's how I feel like when I get two people signing. So classifiers can be used to represent anything. Here's another common one used for cars, vehicles. So I can have like, you know, say I have like a car. Here's my car now. I can hit the gas. So I can, you know, turn sharp. I'm a bad driver apparently, because it's all I'm thinking of. I can say boat. Here's my boat. You have the waves lapping up on the boat. You know, do the whole perfect storm thing. So it could be a boat. I can say motorcycle. Here's my motorcycle now. Same handshake every time. What's different is how I'm setting it up when I'm signing first. So, and unfortunately that's all my time. So we will dig more into classifiers next week. I'll have some example videos and we'll kind of dig more into this. Let's go ahead and pray and then I'll get you all out of here so they can come in. Dear Lord Father, thank you for this class. Thank you for the wonderful study we've got to have. Please bless us as we all go our separate ways, and we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.